This video is sponsored by Rocketman. Keep watching or take a look at the link in the video description to learn more. We've talked a lot about suburban transit on this channel, but there is an age-old question I think we need to address. Across the world, indeed, not just in North America, there is the concept of a park and ride, where you drive your car to use transit. The question is, though, given how common these are around the world, are they good or are they terrible? Welcome back to RM Transit. Let's talk about it. If you're not already, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you get notifications whenever I release a video. As it turns out, as with most aspects of transit and cities, there is no one single answer as to whether park and rides are good or bad. There isn't even one single type of park and ride that we could really evaluate. And so in today's video, we look at the good park and rides, because yes, they do exist, and the giant parkades next to brand new electric light rail lines, which are also a thing that exists. The first thing I want to mention before talking about the various types of park and rides around the world is that park and rides exist around the world. There's often this side to the transit discourse where we act like North America does all these wild and crazy things. And to some extent that is true. We do things to a level that other places do not. But the idea of a park and ride is not uncommon around the world. Inevitably, the first type of park and ride I should address is the ones I see all around me in the Toronto area on the GO Transit rail network. Because as it turns out, the largest parking provider in North America is not an airport or a convention center, but GO Transit. GO Transit was at least in part historically developed to help mitigate congestion on the Toronto area highway network. And to be able to effectively do that, it was thought that people would have to be able to get off the highway, get to a parking lot at a station, and ideally be able to park for free since they had to be inconvenienced by driving off the highway instead of just driving all the way downtown and getting on a train. Things changed over time though. Entire suburbs developed around GO stations, and instead of people just using it as an alternative to the highway, people just started driving straight to the GO station from their suburban homes. Now GO has worked hard to meet the insatiable demand for parking at stations by buying up adjacent lots to their stations and building giant parking structures at its most popular destinations. And to be fair, they are some great looking parking garages. Of course, this is actually not the most unreasonable model when you're only operating a few trains per day. Just build more parking until those arriving by transit and just parking fill up your trains and you're good. Of course, where this model completely falls apart is in a world where the 9 to 5 commute is of decreasing relevance and where train service is not just an in the morning, out in the afternoon type of affair, which is the world we live in. This is where parkades really hurt you. For one, they're expensive to build and maintain, but for two, they also kind of lock you into this car-centric model of transit, since removing them is expensive and redeveloping the land is less practical. And there's always going to be a decent number of people driving into your station area if you provide a giant parkade. Pressure to increase density around electric transit should make parkades near it basically always a bad idea. So there are basically zero cases where such park and rides are a good idea at all. That said, I do think there is a place for park and rides, and a pretty good example of one is not far from where I grew up in Vancouver. I'm going to tell you all about it after this quick message from our sponsor. Now, if you're fortunate enough to be located in a Canadian city and you're watching this channel, chances are you're taking public transit. Streetcars, buses, and maybe even subway trains. With the Canadian winter in full force, I made sure to save my local bus stop and subway station in Rocketman, so that I can check when my next transit vehicle is coming before even walking out of the door. I also use Rocketman to stay informed with real-time transit delays and alerts right in the app, and I can even find out exactly where my bus is with live vehicle locations for a seamless travel experience on transit. Join me in using Rocketman today. Check out the link in the description and download Rocketman for free on both iOS and Android. The particular location of this park and ride is fairly ideal because it's largely in dead space adjacent to a highway interchange. It's also in a low-lying flood-prone area that's unlikely to see any chance of serious redevelopment. At the same time, the facility isn't some grand thing. It was built on the cheap. It's a fairly large surface parking lot and a nice bus loop. The location is even better strategically because it links highway express buses with King George Boulevard, the city of Surrey's main north-south artery. It might actually even get rapid transit someday. Stay tuned for a future video on that. All routes which pass the location quickly pop into the loop and then head back onto their regular path. This allows passengers to transfer onto various routes, but also creates a lot of good multimodal connection opportunities. Better yet, unlike in Toronto and some other cities, you actually have to pay to use this parking, which means that the parking lot at least starts to cover some of its operating costs. And it also means that if the bus is a decent option for you, you don't really want to just drive and park. Even among those who do park, carpooling is encouraged by providing better stops closer to the bus loop for those who find people to group up with and share a vehicle. A location like this is perfect. It's a natural transfer point, it's not excessive in size, and it's fairly low cost. Now, it might surprise you to hear, but I don't actually think that a small amount of parking is the worst thing in the world, even for some major transit stations, as long as it's used for pickup and drop-off. This discourages the use of private cars, allowing people to live car-free, while also providing the ability for people to catch taxis and the like from the station to go to destinations not easily served by transit. At the same time, taxis, which will be shuffling in and out of the station, can move a lot more people than cars, which are just parked there for most of the day. It's best, of course, though, to make sure that this pickup and drop-off is a simple affair, so that if the land needs to be repurposed for something in the future, that's totally practical. Of course, at the same time, a lot of the problem trying to be solved by parking and park and rides should just be solved by cycling and active transportation. Some commutes to a park and ride are going to be impractical to do on a bike, even with great infrastructure, but a lot of them won't be. As it turns out, that park and ride I was talking about at the end has already started to work towards this by providing bike amenities like bike lockers where people can lock up their bike and hop on a bus. Of course, in the future, I'd far prefer to see a modular bike parkade like Vancouver's rolled out at some of its SkyTrain stations, but this is a good start. Locating transit hubs in locations that are really accessible by active transport, whether they be on major cycling routes or greenways, is a smart idea. And at the same time, serving existing transportation hubs by greenways and new active transportation routes should be a top priority. As you can probably see, I don't think parking is necessarily bad, as long as it plays a role which is complementary to transit, not in competition with it. It also needs to be kept in check by limited space and pricing for parking. At the same time, spending money on things like parking structures is a terrible idea. And if you have so much demand for transportation that you're literally considering building a giant box for cars, you can probably afford to run the buses or trains a little further out into your city and provide smaller surface facilities further out where you don't need to build such massive facilities. And so with that, park and rides are not always bad. But they are one of the many parts of our transit systems and plans which should be refined and scrutinized by viewers like you. So, thanks for watching.